Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about dealing with loneliness, a guide to finding peace with yourself. There's a prevailing issue in society these days, and that is loneliness. In recent times, being online, social media, and working from home has isolated us, and it's made the people in our society much easier to distance themselves from one another. This has all kinds of negative consequences, and it really stems from loneliness. And this was all occurring prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has just made it worse. Many of us coming out of the pandemic has experienced an increase in loneliness and isolation. Personally, I've experienced loneliness throughout many stages of my life, and I understand the negative impact of prolonged isolation from people. Such impacts from our emotional and mental well-being. Loneliness can be very difficult to overcome, but there are things that you can do to get yourself out of it, and take steps to address loneliness before it becomes much worse. With that in mind, I created a little guide that helped me during my periods of loneliness. And hopefully it'll help others to navigate their own journey in loneliness and isolation. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, my guide to dealing with loneliness, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. I'm a big advocate of self-reflection and spending time with oneself. Using that time to think about how you can better your life and also plan for the future. So short periods of isolation with purpose and intention can be a beneficial use in your life. And this is especially true if you're running your life ragged and stressed out all the time. Check out my previous video on how to seek solitude to gain the most out of being by yourself and self-reflecting. But prolonged periods of isolation, whether self-inflicted or not, can be very detrimental to your mental health. Multiple studies have shown loneliness and isolation from other people are deadlier than sitting or smoking all the time. This means that you can have extremely beneficial health benefits just having a social network around you. And that in itself is a protector of your health over a long period of time. But combating loneliness and isolation just isn't easy to do when you're in it. It's a hard beast to fight and overcome. And the longer you're in it, the worse it becomes. This is because we all need people and we all need social connections within our lives. And the longer we go without social interactions, the more out of practice we are when we talk to people in life. This means that we might be out of practice with our social graces and may perceive others negatively towards us. In periods of loneliness in my early 20s, I really didn't do much. I worked, went to school, and stayed home and played video games. I had social anxiety during that time and wasn't able to talk to people in their face for more than a few seconds. And I definitely got embarrassed easily when I missed social cues or couldn't find the words that I was looking for. During this time, I also didn't foster and build new connections or reach out to people with frequency. I instead relied on my old friends and staying deeply in my comfort zone. This lifestyle resulted in a lonely life for me, and I struggled to form deep bonds with people. And for the most part, it was a non-starter in romantic relationships. I'm definitely not exaggerating when I say I put in a lot of time and effort to claw my way out of loneliness. It was a very difficult process and it took a long time for me to get over. After more than a decade, I finally feel that I conquered that demon in my life. Nowadays, I'm very comfortable in social situations and don't get embarrassed at all when talking to new people. If you have trouble with loneliness, hopefully my guide can help you. It'll be a difficult and long process, but I guarantee you it will help. Here's my guide on dealing with loneliness. Number 1, get a baseline. When you are tackling a difficult goal such as loneliness, you have to know where you're starting from. This will let you know how much work you're in for. And once you know your baseline, you can get a plan together to figure out what you need to do next. Tackling loneliness is different for each individual. We don't all start at the same place. This baseline can vary wildly based on if you're a true hermit or get embarrassed in social situations like I did. So it's very critical to know where you stand and where you can improve from that point. For me, I knew that I wanted to get better at talking to people in social situations without getting embarrassed. That was my baseline. So my starting point was really that I needed to get out more in the world and meet new people and go through that embarrassing phase. I needed to sustain that effort and power through any embarrassment that I was going to feel. If your baseline is a hermit, you might start to take baby steps out of your house for longer and longer durations each time you go out. This means that you might have much more work to do before you become that social butterfly. So figuring out where you are with loneliness starting out can be a great way to move forward. It can be very hard to do because you have to be very truthful to where you are at that current stage. And be okay with the fact that you have flaws, but that you're going to improve on those flaws. Number 2, have an end goal. The next step that I used was to have an end goal for myself once I defined my baseline. Creating this end goal allows your brain to be fixated on this one thing that you want to do next. It gives you a roadmap to where you want to end up socially. And this means in the long term that you're more likely to complete that goal. When you're trying to escape something as nebulous as loneliness, having defined goals can help you focus in on what you need to do. This can be working on things to fulfill your life, talking to a new person each day, or having 3 close friends that you can bond with. Whatever this end goal is, you have to be sure to make it as realistic as possible in an achievable short timeline. Don't just plan big goals and hope it'll work out in the end. You need smaller, more intermittent goals. My end goals were always something easy and short-term to work with. Each of these goals didn't take more than a few months for me to try to complete. I never planned any unrealistic goals, and if I did, I wouldn't see them through anyways. My goals were to talk to people longer, maybe I had a set duration, and not be self-conscious or embarrassed during that time. Depending on what your goals are, have a realistic time frame, like 6 months, to try to complete that goal. And if you need more support, you can break it down into smaller goals as well. And then going backwards and looking at all the things that might be needed to complete that. When you're trying to get out of loneliness, you really need those small goalposts that you complete and you can feel good about yourself. This will help you to complete more goals along the way. So if you're really serious about getting out of loneliness, you have to have that end goal and work your way towards it. Number 3, baby steps. Now comes the hard part of actually doing the work. When you're combating loneliness, your mind becomes your biggest obstacle. Your mind is trying to prevent you from going into dangerous situations, perceived or real dangers. People can be a form of danger with their opinions and judgments on you. This means that your mind might be actively working against you to shelter you from those criticisms. And that might mean keeping you lonely for longer periods of time. This means that you might need to take small positive steps to combat loneliness and isolation. Whether that means calling up a friend or walking into a crowded place to get your human interactions. Anything to get your mind out of seeing other people as dangerous objects. Do anything that you can to baby step it out of feeling lonely, because over a long period of time that can be really beneficial. In my late teens and early 20s, I was at my worst when it comes to loneliness. But during this period, I was also introduced to new situations all the time. This meant that I was slowly being taken out of my comfort zone little by little each and every day. And in addition, I did small things to help me get more comfortable with talking to people. This meant that I asked questions that I already knew the answer to just to get practice talking to people. I also talked to my friends about certain social situations and what were the social cues of that situations were. This way I could prepare myself for the next social encounter that I had. All of these helped me to ease my social anxiety and to feel less lonely over time. Baby steps can really be anything, as long as it takes you out of your comfort zone or you're feeling a little challenged in social situations. Something that is ultimately not as difficult to do, but can ultimately get you out of feeling lonely. Taking baby steps continuously was one of the ways that I was able to get out of feeling lonely. I had to really challenge that part of myself, and breaking it down to small baby steps helped a lot. Number 4, force it to happen. And on the other side of this, sometimes you just need a big push to get you out of feeling lonely. Taking a bold move and forcing yourself into a situation in which you reset your environment can be a way to go to snap you out of feeling lonely. This can mean moving out of your parents' house, changing jobs, or moving to a different city. Because at the end of the day, baby steps, while helpful, can only take you so far in terms of progress on some time scale. When you make a big forceful jump, you can improve yourself rapidly, shorter in time. Because a big part of loneliness is the environment that we're currently in. Because the environment can play a big part in why we feel lonely on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes our environment can hold us hostage and limit our opportunity to be less lonely. When this happens, take a bold move and change up everything in your life, and it might actually help. So taking a bold move and changing up your life might be the thing to snap you out of feeling lonely. This happened to me on multiple occasions, and it definitely has helped me to get out of my shell and feel less lonely overall. I really credit taking bold moves in my life to ultimately get over my social anxiety and feeling of loneliness. When I was baby stepping things in my teens and early 20s, I was still in the environment that made me that way. So although I was less lonely, the environment kept me from doing new things that would break out of my shell and fix the problem long term. When I moved to different places in my mid-20s, I was forced to make new friends in that certain area. And being in a new environment and forcing myself to meet new people distracted me from my loneliness. I didn't have time to dwell on it, and I just moved forward with my life. Big moves aren't easy normally within your lives, and it might take hitting rock bottom to get you there. But I do think if loneliness is worse than smoking or sitting, and it's a real health issue long term, then all efforts must be made to combat it. Because the longer you're stuck in that prolonged isolation and loneliness, the harder it is to make a bold, forceful move. And at some point, you may not even want to put in the effort to baby step it as well. So take a bold risk if you're able to tackle loneliness head on. And number 5, it will be uncomfortable. The feeling of loneliness can stem from multiple different areas within your life. And combating loneliness might take effort on multiple fronts to overcome it. It can come from social anxiety, body image, or self-confidence in oneself. Whatever the root cause of loneliness are for you, there will be periods where you're going to be very uncomfortable. This can be either dealing with the negative mental aspects of social isolation or even social anxiety when confronting another person. When I was trying to overcome my social anxiety and not be easily embarrassed, I fought myself mentally every step of the way. My brain was telling me that I was making a fool of myself and that everyone was laughing at me on the inside. And this would happen every time I was talking to a new person for any length of duration. It got worse when I got embarrassed and my face flushed red in front of that person. That itself reinforced the negative mental model that I had for myself. But what I was able to do was one day telling myself I'm just going to deal with feeling embarrassed and just go through it and feel it. This meant that whatever I say in front of that person, I just wouldn't care and then I'll push through even being flushed in the face red. It was an active choice not to give a care in the world to what the other person thought of me. And this was the breakthrough that I needed to tell myself, because afterwards it became less and less of an issue. Going through your own experience of tackling loneliness will be different depending on where you start from. You'll have to go in with an open mind, knowing that it's hard and you might take a long time for you to resolve this. And that those periods of uncomfortableness are coming and that you need to prepare for them. Always keep that end goal in mind of what you're trying to achieve for yourself. So a big part of overcoming loneliness is knowing that the journey is hard but that it's well worth it in the long run. So here are my general thoughts on dealing with loneliness. Looking back on my own experiences with loneliness, I was lucky in the fact that I had external circumstances pushing me and forcing me out of my comfort zone. And that those external circumstances took me out of the environment that I was in that caused my social anxiety and loneliness in the first place. Had I stayed home with my parents or never moved out of my hometown, I don't think I would be the person I am today. And quite likely, I'd still be dealing with loneliness to this day. And the people around me at that time just didn't give me the connection that I really needed from them. This meant that when I moved to a new environment, I created friends and connections with people that I really wanted to bond with. And that stronger connection from those bonds ultimately eased me out of feeling lonely. And ultimately, I benefited greatly from the new set of friends that were able to form a deep connection with me. So really identifying what makes you lonely can be a big key in changing that. So that was my guide on dealing with loneliness. Even though in the internet age, we are more connected than ever before, we are also feeling more lonely than ever before. And after the pandemic, this has only gotten worse over time. In my early years, I had to deal with social anxiety and a healthy dose of loneliness. To combat that, I worked hard over 10 plus years trying to claw my way out of feeling lonely. And what really helped me in the long run was to have an end goal, forcing big things to happen, and knowing that it was going to be uncomfortable along the way. So if you have trouble dealing with loneliness, hopefully my guide will help you out as well. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment down below on what are your thoughts about feeling lonely and what have you done to get yourself out of it. And I'll see you next time.